I watch Cyberpunk Edgerunners from a tantric point of view. This cartoon is having strong resonance with two cosmic forces. I want to share with you some deeper insight, the kind that feed your soul's need for resonance and recognition, not just your brain's need for stimulation. If you've already seen it, you probably loved it for the reasons most people did. If you haven't watched it, I would guess the bloodbath and cyborg-soaked violence are maybe what kept you away. Let me tell you in my own words what I actually see underneath the story. It's about a kid who has to find his way through every adversity in front of him. The misfit who carves his own path out of step with the system around him. I like that shape. For me, it only holds up, though, if it's connected to Source. A world with no God in it isn't an option I can work with. And I don't think it's a strong enough foundation for any real hero. At best, it's the first step out of trauma, not the destination. Still, underneath all the blood and brawling, there's something genuinely good here. The boy grows up, he matures, and in the end, he dies to save the woman he loves. After failing to save his mother and the man who mentored him, simply because he was still in the process of growing up, still under training, being formed, even though they needed him the most. But the actual idea underneath all of this is this, I believe. To live and to die for something larger than your own ego. And through that, his beloved gets to live out her own dream. At its core, it's still a love story. Still about a love that grows everything it touches and in whose name you sacrifice your ego so you can finally live for real. From a tantric point of view, this cartoon is having strong resonance with two cosmic forces. The cosmic force of time and transformation, called in Hinduism Kali, and to a certain degree with the force of courage and mental strength or focusing, called in Hinduism Chinnamasta. I wouldn't watch this kind of anime, it's not my style. Watching this does put you at risk of activating mostly instinctual and dehumanizing impulses, because you need some kind of tools or some sort of knowledge to see past the immediate activation it triggers in the brain, the instinct itself, due to so much fight and so much violence and so much blood and so much sex. Well, it's not so much sex, but it's enough. Enough of it, it's quite in your face. So I believe you need to look at it with something else and to be able to see past the surface. Perhaps you do, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I just felt to say it and to make this video about it. According to Hindu tradition, we have 10 such cosmic forces, part of a system called the Mahavidyas, cosmic sisterhood, divine, godly, high creative energies. All work intertwined with each other according to the will of God, the Supreme Consciousness. And the ones that I'm referring to here are Kali, as I was saying, and Chinnamasta. They are both considered terrible. Kali is probably most known in the West as well. Chinnamasta not so much, but however they are both considered strongly impactful. And each one carries a different face of how the divine, the feminine, the femininity, the energy of God moves through dissolution toward freedom. Kali is like the raw current, total, undisciplined, devouring, having fun even. Chinnamasta is the heroine current, the bold, fierce, holding a cutting sword. Let's start with Kali for now and then continue with Chinnamasta in my interpretation. Night City is a place that runs on bloodshed. Every major fight in this show, like Maine against Max Tag, David against the rival gangs, the entire finale opens bodies instead of just defeating them. Violence and blood in your face, and it's on purpose. Most viewers, including myself, and even the ones who love this genre, I think they register this as a shock to the system, whether you're aware of it or not. I want to stop a little bit here because it's disturbing, just not in the way you think. In tantric symbolism, blood is rarely about violence. It represents prana, life force itself, and the dripping blood in Kali's iconography shows her actively engaged in cosmic work of destruction and renewal, constantly recycling the energy of existence. In sacred texts, Kali's consumption of demon blood represents her power to absorb and to destroy negative forces at their root, while spiritually purifying our consciousness. So you see, the disturbance most viewers feel is more than a natural reaction to violence. I would say it's the collective subconscious triggering a response in our brain, telling our body, reminding our body about what the body is actually made of, which is finite, mortal, pulsing. In a culture that has built itself almost entirely around desensitizing us to that. The flinch isn't fear of the screen. It's contact with the something true that nobody gave you language for. And there's a second layer worth holding on to here, because it maps into Night City with real precision. In the old myth of Kali, a demon whose name translates as he whose seed is blood, spawned a new clone of himself from every drop of his blood that touched the ground. Kali stopped him from destroying the world by drinking his blood before it could fall on the ground, swallowing the multiplication itself rather than adding to the pool. And watch how violence actually behaves across this show. Maine's death breeds more desperate jobs, which breeds Kiwi's betrayal, which breeds the trap at Arasaka Tower, which breeds the final massacre. Every act of force grows the next one. You cannot outfight that demon with more force. You can only stop it the way Kali does, by absorbing the cost into yourself instead of spilling more of it outward. And that is exactly what David becomes for the people left in his crew. In the final episode, David is in the middle of the fight on the same street he grew up on. And it cuts to the boy he once was, laughing on that same pavement, with no idea yet what any of it will cost. His mother's dream was always for him to reach the top floor of Arasaka. She doesn't live to see what the dream actually becomes. He's about to reach that top floor, not as a graduate of Arasaka Academy, the way she imagined it, but in order to save the woman he loves. He gets there for love, not status, fulfilling his mother's wish in a shape she could never have recognized as fulfillment. Ironic. The tantric reading of Kali's laughter is precise, and it fits perfectly here. Her laughter signifies her ironic attitude towards all those who imagine they can escape from their own transformation, their own spiritual evolution, as individuals and as parts of one whole. And that's exactly what's happening on that street. Recognition, which only looks like madness if you stop at the surface. Nobody gets to opt out of becoming who they actually are, no matter how hard life tries to negotiate a different deal. And that's the joke. It's enormous and it's actually not cruel. But I don't think that's the whole truth of the scene. Pure Kali laughter points outward. It's the universe laughing at someone else's illusion. What's happening here is turn on himself. And this is the part that matters. He doesn't dissolve into it. He stays standing, mid-fight, fully present, lucid inside his own cosmic joke, instead of being swept away by it. And that staying lucid quality isn't Kali's gift. It belongs to the other goddess I mentioned, Chinnamasta. Her entire energy is about a mind so sharp and so clear that it's witnessing its own dissolving without losing the thread. I believe what we are actually watching on the street is Kali's fire, carried by a mind that Chinnamasta had already disciplined enough to hold it. The name Kali comes from Kala, which translates from Sanskrit as time. And she embodies the truth that everything is subject to the power of time, including the ego, actually, especially the ego. By burning through illusion, she frees what is underneath it for something new. Watch what physically happens across the show. A thin, bullied teenager becomes a fully grown man with a body that can carry an entire crew. He doesn't seize Main's place through ambition. He simply unexpectedly is the one left standing in the position a leader needs to take. And he holds the crew as a family together anyway, because the holding was already in him before the muscles were. And this is Kali's transformation through time. It's not about changing costumes, but the split moment where a smaller, more frightened self has to be completely burned through before a larger responsibility has anywhere to land. That space in between. Where Kali is the wild current, Chinnamasta is what the current looks like once it has been aimed or directed somewhere. It is focused, sharp, brave. She focuses her energies and she feeds everyone. She is the one cutting off all mental nonsense, leaving only the truth. In the first episode, David's courage is rather bravado. Letting Doc install his first implant, confronting his bully, the rich classmate who mocks him for being poor. Bravado doesn't know yet what it's risking. That shift across the show as he trains, as he learns which implants he actually wants and why, and more importantly, how to hold them with his mind instead of just his nerve. What I love most about the great goddess Chinnamasta, the power of courage and lucidity, is that she thrives in the paradox of being simultaneously a terrifying force of destruction and a peaceful giver of true life. Chinnamasta is the patron of what Tantra calls the hero stance, and her own mantra is used specifically for courage, real courage, the kind that she teaches and she inspires. It doesn't mean the absence of fear. It is about knowing exactly what something will cost you and consenting to pay that price anyway, even if that often means it is done for someone else's sake. Holding both at once takes a kind of courage most of us never get tested on. Maine does not simply lose his mind into cyber psychosis and die there, even though he has episodes of it throughout the show. In his final stand, I believe, he is the one who is lucid. Sharp lucid, seeing through the illusion. He is the one who tells David clearly that he is the one who is going to die there, while David needs to be the one who lives on and keep moving on without him. There is a detail in how the show depicts this, and I love it. As Maine goes under, what we see from inside his mind is a vast empty desert. A long straight road, no chrome, no city, no sound. And on that road, in the one moment that actually matters, Maine isn't thrashing against his own mind anymore. He's calm. He looks at Magstack coming for him, not as a man losing himself, but as a man who has already decided how this ends, who has come to terms with it. What if man's end is not a failure of the human mind against cybernetics, but a supreme triumph of the godly spirit in humans over the metal? Cyberpsychosis, what if that is a metaphor used for what happens when the upgraded ego gets trapped inside its own machine, unable to find its way back out? Nobody rescues Maine from this trap. Nobody could, anyway. He builds his own pyre, lights it himself, and decapitates that ego on his own terms before it can decapitate him. What is left in that very last second is just his lucid spirit, finally free of the metal. He tells David he must leave. And then there's Rebecca. David entrusts her with the injections, the medicine that keeps his mind from sleeping as the implants keep stacking. That means he's actually handing her his life, basically. His mental clarity placed in the smallest, fairest hands on the crew. I think David chooses her specifically because Rebecca represents his inner child, the innocence, the bravado, the cute, and the wild. She's the one that knows best what goes on with him, inside him, yet she is the most ignored, despite how loud she may scream the truth. There is a detail that makes this land even harder. David gets his very last dose of that medicine at almost the same exact time when Rebecca is killed in the finale. From that point on, there's no one left holding that stream for him. Whatever clarity carries him through the fight with Adam Smasher, the ultimate fight, his true match, he has to hold entirely on his own, with nothing external steadying him anymore. And in my understanding, by this point, David has integrated his inner child, represented by Rebecca, and has become whole. He is fully matured for this encounter. Let me know what you think. How do you see it? Across all this chaos and escalating stakes of this show, one thing in David doesn't seem to waver, and that is his initial promise to get Lucy to the moon, the dream that she had carried since long before she ever met him. He holds to that promise with a steadiness that has nothing to do with how fast everything else around him is falling apart. In the end, he isn't able to take her there himself. His last message to her, passed on through Falco, is an apology for that, but he makes sure that she gets there anyway. The promise survives and is fulfilled, even when the shape it was supposed to take doesn't. Isn't this patience in its true active form? Not waiting around, not passivity, but determination, perseverance, and consistency held against everything trying to take them away from him. Chinnamasta is depicted as standing on top of a couple that is making love. Isn't this image carrying the same teaching? The couple is an expression of desire and passion, and the fact that this goddess, is standing on them, she doesn't crush them and she doesn't drown in their passion. She's not pulled in. This is a little bit like David's own want to be loved back, to have a future with the girl, to be the one who actually takes her to the moon, while staying steady enough to keep his word regardless of what he personally gets to keep. What if real patience is desire and passion held without being ruled by it, in service of someone else's dream rather than your own pride? Or even better, let's say in a good way, taking pride by sacrificing your own for someone else, not because you are a martyr, but because, well, that's the best you can do given the circumstances, and because you love. If we step back for a second and look at all these ideas, they are kind of one current, witnessed at two different moments of its own unfolding. Kali, the cosmic force of transformation and time, is that moment, that instant where everything you had been holding on to finally breaks open. The blood, the laughter, the transformation, total and explosive. While the great cosmic power, the goddess of courage and lucidity, mental clarity, Chinnamasta, is what that same current looks like once it had been given direction. The courage, the clarity, the patience, discipline offered on purpose. Neither one finishes the story alone. What makes David's last stretch unforgettable is that both are fully present in him at once. The fire that has burned through every attachment he had, and the steadiness, the steady hand that keeps offering mid-fire without spilling a drop it didn't mean to give. And here is exactly why I wanted to make this video and express my perspective. Because again, like I said in the beginning, most people watching Cyberpunk Edgerunners feel something big, especially in that ending, and rarely find out what it actually is that touched them inside, beyond the adrenaline and the visuals. The blood, the bodies, the violence, without a frame to hold these things mostly just fit our nervous system, and in particular our defense mechanism are triggered, activated, and it doesn't elevate much in us if it's just that. Most likely you get that which is fed by that kind of repeated unprocessed stimulation, the instinctual reactive part of us, not the part that is actually hungry for meaning. And if you watch what David is actually carrying underneath all of that tragedy, his mother's wish for him to reach the top of Arasaka Tower, Main's vision of what their crew was supposed to become, Lucy's dream, a dream that started long before she ever met him, none of these were his to begin with, and this was pretty obvious for everybody throughout the show. He breaks his own body and mind not out of greed, but because he is carrying dreams he inherited rather than he chose them. And this is where I want to push past your comfort zone. Stories love the trope of one person sacrificing themselves for the many. It's everywhere. We've been fed for generations, and it quietly trains us to find something noble in our own self-destruction. However, I strongly disagree. I believe the real tragedy in Night City was not that David and Maine lose to a corporation bigger than them. It is that David, for most of the story, is trying to earn his own worth by carrying weight that was never his to carry in the first place. What I find most alive in this story is that every major character in David's world isn't simply someone he meets in Night City. Each one is a part of him that has to be integrated before the story can end. His mother is the inherited program. Her dream of Arasaka Tower running in him as background code long before he had words for it. The standard he never chose but always felt measured against. Maine is the leader already forming inside David, and a shadow of what the Chrome does to a mind that isn't anchored deeply enough to hold it. His final conscious choice, lucid until the last second, becomes the fuel David runs on from that point forward. Rebecca is the inner child, holding David's mental clarity literally in these injections that she carries for him. She screams the truth the loudest and gets dismissed the most. When she's gone, David has to hold his own center entirely on his own, which, as I see it, is the moment the inner child is finally integrated rather than just protected. Lucy is the soul's own direction, the part of David that already knew there was something beyond Night City, beyond the system, and recognized it the moment she named it. His promise to get her to the moon is the promise he makes to that part of himself, held all the way to the end. And Adam Smasher is the full shadow, what David would have become if the Chrome had won completely. Maximum metal, zero spirit. This is what I see underneath the whole thing. Not a boy defeated by a system too large for him, but a boy who integrates every part of himself one by one, all the way down to the last fight, so that something true in him gets to survive, expressed through the woman he loves. Seen through Kali and Chinnamasta perspectives, the transformation through time, the courage and lucidity in action. The endings stop being defeats handed to them from outside. They become something internal instead, the burning away of who they thought they had to be, followed by the conscious choice of who to become next. Nobody who made this show was thinking about Mahavidyas and Hinduism and interpretation of esoteric philosophy. And yet, they are there, these philosophies and these cosmic forces, and they are doing exactly the work that they have done since forever, even in a story that has no idea it is carrying them. This is the part I actually want you to take into your own world from this video, the one edging closer to its own cyborg future. The real heroism in this story, I don't believe it was David surviving 9 cities through his own strength, but mostly it was the moment that he stopped needing his mother's dream or Maine's expectations or anyone else's idea of who he should become to make his life mean something, and started living it for Lucy and for himself, because by then he had actually chosen it, consciously, willingly. And this is the liberation that I see underneath the whole story. It never comes from sacrificing your own well-being to keep someone else's dream alive. What defines you isn't the dream you are handed. It is what you do once you recognize it was handed to you. The sacrifice actually being asked of any of us throughout our lives is not to give up ourselves or our lives. It is to give up our fear to live fully, our need to be measured against everyone around us, our hunger for someone outside us to confirm that we do the right thing. If we let this go, we discover that underneath it's not emptiness. It is godly spirit that was running this body the whole time, turning whatever life force is left in you into a freedom nobody handed you and nobody can take away from you. In a way, this series reminded me of another older movie called Sucker Punch, a film that I had seen some good years ago, and it's carrying a similar idea with just as much chaos and violence at the surface. And that was the first film of that kind that I ever watched consciously, looking to recognize and interpret resonances instead of just letting the chaos overwhelm me or trigger my defense system. And once you start doing that, once you start asking what a story is actually carrying instead of what that is just showing you, it gets hard to go back to consuming anything passively again. So if you felt something touched you watching David's story in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and some part of you suspects that there is more underneath than the algorithm wants you to notice, trust that part and go look for it. Read about the energetic forces, cosmic forces I just mentioned earlier in the video, Kali and Chinnamasta, especially if your intuition was already pointing towards them before you had a name for them. Ask, what is it in you that recognizes itself in that laughter or in that bloodshed or in that one promise kept all the way to the end? Because the alternative is just letting the stimulation pass through you and calling it entertainment. And then you need something more and you just are trapped in consumerism. And every time we do that without asking what we actually let in, we feed something quieter than excitement, and we dim a little the very thing in us that was reaching for resonance in the first place, our inner light, our soul. Now tell me, what do you choose to take home from this video? Let's spirit.